Next week, Democrats will have another chance at their so far failed efforts at passing voting rights legislation. The difference with the latest bill is that it has the support of Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. But even with his support, prospects appear dim because Republicans are expected to maintain their filibuster, meaning you need 60 votes, not 50, to pass it. The Freedom to Vote Act, that's the new one, is a slightly pared down version of the original bill, which was called the For the People Act. And just to review, the For the People Act was the original sweeping voting rights bill that passed the House last March, but not the Senate. Now, that bill requires that states allow any voter to cast a mail ballot without any excuse. It offers several ways to return the ballot, prevent voter ID requirements for mail voting, and calls mailing absentee ballot applications, calls for mailing ballot applications to all registered voters. The new Manchin-backed bill, the Freedom to Vote Act, does not mandate mailing the applications and does allow for voter ID requirements. Now, the For the People Act says that any voter without ID should be allowed to vote as long as they sign a sworn statement attesting to their identity. The Freedom to Vote Act says ID is needed, but bank statements or utility bills will work just fine, too. The original bill says states should count ballots that were cast in the correct state, even if they weren't cast in the correct precinct. The new bill says votes can count as long as the incorrect precinct is in the correct county. There's a lot here. Joining me now is the Reverend Dr. William Barber. He's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. He's the president of Repairers of the Breach, and he is someone who takes this voting rights stuff so seriously that he's been arrested a few times in the last few months in protests. Reverend Dr. Barber, it is a pleasure to see you this morning. You and I have talked about voting rights bills, and your view is that they need to be absolute. They need to guarantee everybody the same rights. They need to be fair. They need to encourage voting. Can you live with a watered-down bill?
What? I think.
Oh, there we go. There we go. We got you now.
I don't think a lot of people cannot talk to voting rights lawyers. But Manchin created a lot of Republican positions into the bill. There are a lot of things in this bill that ought to be amended out. And we said early on that there's three issues: voter protection, that's the infrastructure of our democracy; the infrastructure of wages and health care, which is our infrastructure, our daily lives, and the infrastructure of our bridges and technology, instead of separating these things out. Secondly, first of all, the bill's name is Freedom to Vote. We don't have a freedom to vote. We have a right to vote. That should be amended. Secondly, this is the first time in history we would have codified voter ID as necessary for election integrity. That's straight Trumpian Republican language. That should not be in the bill because it's not true. Signature attestation is what has worked and what should be there. Also, what we see is he's slowly putting different things in that come straight out of the Republican lingo. And guess what? He said that he supported the For the People's Act. He was a signature when John Lewis was alive. When John Lewis died and the Senate changed, all of a sudden he changed, and he's not making any commitment to ending the filibuster. So he's got them negotiating on something that may not even pass because he's never going to break the filibuster.
So let's talk about that, because there are a lot of people, yourself included, who have made the point that if you want to keep the filibuster because you think it's tradition or it's good or whatever, that's fine. But there are certain things, including civil rights and human rights matters, for which it should not apply. At least if Manchin is in support of a bill and there are 50 Democrats in support of it, there is some possibility that that could become real. Would you agree with that?
There is some possibility, and perhaps, but the problem is not just what's left out of the bill, but what he's slipping into the bill. The first time, again, Ali, in 200 and some odd years, we will codify that voter ID, which started after Obama won, really, is necessary. integrity. That's dangerous language, especially since in North Carolina, we just won on a voter ID case in the courts, where the court said that it was being used to suppress the vote. And then secondly, I'm deeply concerned how he's allowed them to split these things. You know, the Democrats should have started this messaging. They should have had the faces and the voices of people who would be impacted. We tried to say this to the handlers of the president of the White House, and for some reason they didn't get it. They should have never let voting rights just be a black issue and then separate it out from the economic issue. They should have had people whose lives were being impacted, both the people whose lives would be impacted by the Build Back Better plan, you know, the women, the mothers, the children, the workers, the people at risk for climate difficulties, and the people would be impacted by voter suppression, because it's not just black people. The laws that these state legislatures are trying to put in place would affect 56 million Americans who use things like mail-in ballots and same-day registration and early voting in the last election. We should have made this a matter of democracy. Now, we have time to do it, but I'm afraid that what has happened is people have gotten caught up in, is this Manchin's bill or Biden's bill? Is it $3 trillion or $4 trillion for any of these different pieces of legislation, rather than what's the impact? Who will it affect? Who will it hurt? How will it further the democracy? And really, in a real sense, not passing voting rights protection with poor and low wealth people representing 30% of the electorate. We just did a major report on this yesterday, groundbreaking. Poor and low income voters represent 30% of the electorate, and voter suppression will hurt poor and low wealth people of every race, creed, and color. Not to pass a voter protection, not to pass some kind of investment in poor and low wealth communities is economically insane and politically incompetent.
Reverend, good to see you as always. Thank you for joining us. The Reverend Dr. William Barber is the co-chairman of the Poor People's Campaign. Thanks for your time this morning.